How do I create this story? What kind of journey could I tell? What sort of characters are there? What's the world's gonna be like? This kind of questions always popped up into his mind during the writing process. But now a different kind of questions are popping up. Will people like the story? Are people even interested in this? How could someone even relate to this? Is it even good enough? Since as long as I can remember, creativity has always been present in his life. When he was a child, he liked to make info sheets of his favorite characters and made little comics about them. Then during his early adolescence, he likes to write rap lyrics, inspired by his favorite rappers. Meanwhile, in his later adolescence years, he also started to write scripts for it to be made into short films. With all the creative things he did, he realizes that all of his endeavors are tied with storytelling. Then, with this realization of his, he starts to delve more into how to write and make good stories. His approach in making stories is similar to the filmmaking process, which consists of pre-production, production, and post-production. In his pre-production phase, he writes down the ideas and what kind of stories he wanted to convey. That will be the foundation of the story. Then after he decided on what he wanted to do or create, he then started his production phase, which is to build on that very foundation he has chosen before. After he had done that, then he continued to the post-production phase, which is to revise and refine on what he had written before. But then he found out that there is a fourth phase to his approach, which is distribution. The distribution process constitutes more on how the marketing will be, to who this story is targeted to, and where will the story be released. This process is kind of foreign to him, because all he has known is to create, not to market. But he obliged to this phase. So he started to learn more about this phase. He learned that every story needs a demographic and should be able to cater the very audience it is being targeted. And for people to see his story, he needs to know how to market this story of his through social media. And within those social media, he needs to learn about captions, algorithms, thumbnails, etc. The more he knew, the better. But little does he know, the distribution process has diluted his own knowledge on how to create stories. The ideas are coming in, but the words don't. As if he knew that the premise is interesting for people to see, but not what the story will be like. Perhaps the problem is he started to prioritize more on what people will think is interesting rather than what he himself thinks is interesting. So he said to himself, okay, let's just make this one and move on. The distribution phase has no place within the creation process. It worked before, it could work again, right? Alas, it was benign of him. He began to struggle more in picking letters to conjure the words he will need to piece a sentence. He already recognizes that the distribution phase is important, but is it necessary to have it in the creation process? He did not have the answer to that. But when he tries to make it work with the process he knows best, the ideas keep clashing in his mind. So the story is gonna be like this. No. It needs something more to rely on people. But it's enough to build something. But will it be enough to build an audience? There's no use in thinking that what came after the story does not concern the creation process itself. Not during, and definitely not before. The need to write is something that must come from within, not from an outside voice. At least that's what I believed in before I tried to make this script. I started writing this script because I hated the distribution phase. During the process of making this and deciding to make this into a YouTube video, I already am thinking about the distribution phase in my creative process. I already started to think about what kind of thumbnail I would use and what the title of the video would be. It turns out I was just struggling to make a balanced story that brings something to myself and to you at the same time. The questions that are popping up in my head before now became less of a burden. Became something more profoundly more bearable and directed to myself and to you as the audience. Will you like this story? Are you yourself even interested in this? How could you relate to this? Is it good enough for you? Perhaps if I myself found this interesting, you will too. Or some of you, at least. After all, stories are meant to be seen, heard, or even viewed in different kinds of medium. Distribution process really is just an extension of how me connecting my stories to you. Conjuring an idea, putting it down into a medium that we choose, only for us to revise it with no end, while simultaneously coursing through it to find the way out, the ending, and make it so the world can see what we made. Perhaps that is the process. The process of an expression that will represent what we feel, what we want, what we need. What we made is an ever-growing. There's always will be an ever-growing process. The ending of this video is very much so like unfinished. But I think it is kind of the point of what I wanted to convey. An ever-growing process of an expression. Something that we as artists, I think, will go through, must go through. Perhaps there is no ending. And perhaps that's the beauty of it. And if you are still with me at this stage of the recording, then thank you for listening and joining me in this process of expression of mine. And I hope if you also have been in this position, you're able to get out of your process and let your expression be seen and or heard by the world too. Of course, if you want to.